Hello, welcome to my first ever reading wrap up. I had a great reading month in July, so I'm going to be going through and giving you guys my thoughts on the books I read. Some of these I read a little bit before July, but I just haven't had a chance to talk about them yet. So I'm going to be going over a total of 10 books, and 4 of them were actually 5-star reads. So let's get into it. I have to start with my absolute favorite book I've read in a very long time, and that is The Girl with All the Gifts. So I went into this book without knowing really anything about it, and I was completely blown away in the first 30 pages. The POV was one that I would have never expected and have never read anything like, and I absolutely loved it. I would love to give a full summary of this book because it was such a good read, but I think it's better if you go into it knowing as little as possible, honestly. All I will say is this book feels kind of like a mix between Matilda and Warm Bodies, and no, I will not elaborate on that, but this was a 5-star read for sure. Speaking of which, y'all, I am so done with Goodreads ratings, so I just wanted to check this one out because I'm like, oh, this must be so high, like a 4.7, 4.8 or something like that. But I get on there and what do I find? In what world is this okay? But anyway, I digress. On to the next book. This copy I bought of Carmilla has to be the most bootleg book I've seen. You can probably count the pixels on the front. Anyway, I read several very spooky books this month. I was kind of wanting to do like a Summerween type readathon, but I didn't actually have the time to do all the prompts, so I just kind of chose some, fun, spooky fall books. This was so eerie and chilling and atmospheric. Carmilla gives me very much Catherine from the Vampire Diaries vibes. So this book is supposed to be the inspiration for Dracula, and I do really love Dracula, but I think I loved this book a little bit more. It was definitely spooky throughout the entirety of the book, where I felt like Dracula kind of lags in a lot of places. So this story is set in Austria, where our main character is a 19-year-old named Laura, and she's getting close with this mysterious girl named Carmilla. And this is all happening at the same time that young girls in town are mysteriously dying. So the gothic setting of constantly gray weather and abandoned towns and castles in ruins sets a perfect tone for this story. This has everything you could want in a classic vampire novella, so 5 out of 5 stars. Next up is A Confederacy of the Dunces. I have never read a book quite like this. It's so weird and funny, but also kind of cringeworthy at times. To sum up the book, we have our main character, Ignatius Riley. He is a completely unhinged menace to society. He's very, very smart, but completely socially inept, and he believes he's kind of like the only sane, morally good person left in this world. He goes from yelling at his mother to leading a revolt to selling hot dogs, all while continuing to work on his brilliant manifesto. So if you love satire and aren't easily offended, I think you'll like this. Ignatius Riley, he holds nothing back. He has insults for absolutely everyone, so no one gets left out in that department. I saw several reviews saying how awful and horrible and disgusting the main character was, and I was like, guys, that is literally the entire point of the book. Also, the audiobook for this is absolutely phenomenal. I was laughing out loud. It's probably the best audiobook I've honestly listened to. So Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec actually played Ignatius in a play for the Huntington Theater Company back in 2015, and it was a major hit. Next book is Franny and Zooey. Half of this book takes place in a bathroom where one of our main characters, Zoe, is trying to take a bath and shave, and his mom is just hounding him for what seems like an endless amount of time. So Franny and Zoe are brother and sister, and they both kind of feel like outsiders, and at one point in the book, Franny has a mental break. So the majority of the book is figuring out what's wrong with Franny and kind of how to help her. In my head, Zoe is like perfectly described as Timothée Chalamet. This book isn't really plot driven, so it's kind of hard to explain the whole thing. I loved it though. I found this amazing artwork on Etsy, and I really think I'm gonna get this poster. It fits the book perfectly. Next up is East of Eden, and I swear no one knows how to write a more desolate, miserable existence for a character better than Steinbeck. So this novel is about families kind of repeating the same generational sin over and over again, and it draws parallels to the story of Cain and Abel. The relationships in this book are deeply complicated and kind of explores nature versus nurture, especially in relation to the father figure. James Dean actually starred in the 1955 adaptation of this novel, which I thought was pretty cool. So there is one of the most truly evil characters that I have ever read in this book. I want to hate her, but also at the same time, I'm like, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. The duality of man. Steinbeck wrote this with beautiful prose. This is very much a tragedy. The characters and family dynamics were very fleshed out. I would give this a 5-star, but I felt like it dragged on a little bit too much, and maybe about 100 pages could have been cut out. The ending was somewhat abrupt, I thought, but I would still definitely recommend this, and I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book is The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. So in this book, Sita, the oldest daughter of Vivi, is being interviewed by the New York Times for a play she just directed. She describes her mother in a very not so positive light, which causes all kinds of strain in their relationship. Sita is begging her mom for forgiveness, and eventually her mother's longtime friends, the Yaya Sisterhood, step in to help Sita. So they send her mother's scrapbook of childhood memories, referred to as the Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. So we go back and forth from present day to the past when Vivi Walker was growing up. We kind of see that past through the little mementos in the scrapbook. This book explores an extremely complicated mother-daughter relationship. This is a very southern story. It's set in the heart of Louisiana. I felt like I was transported back to a super hot Louisiana night in the 50s. So I did really like this book, but kind of same as the other ones, I felt it dragged on a little bit too long. So this was actually made into a movie starring Sandra Bullock, and I thought it was great. Of course, the movie doesn't have as much detail in the book, but I think they did a great job portraying the story. So next up we have The Master and Margarita, and I absolutely love this cover. I think it's stunning. So I actually hadn't heard of this until I was going through a list of Pedro Pascal's favorite books, and I was definitely intrigued. I honestly don't even know where to start with this book. It's so symbolic and strange and complicated. It's very hard to put into words. And the more I think about explaining it, I feel like the less I really know. So this is a Russian classic, and the main premise of this is the devil comes to Moscow, and he brings with him his posse of crazy characters. One of them is an extremely large black cat that likes to chain smoke and drink vodka and play chess. So we have some really interesting characters. And while they're in Moscow for 3 days, they're wreaking absolute havoc on the town. So we go back and forth from this to 2,000 years prior to the crucifixion of Christ. And we see like the story between Pontius Pilate and Jesus. So there's kind of a lot of stuff going on in this book. There are so many themes in this. We have good versus evil, reward and punishment, and there's just so much packed into this. I really feel like I need to read it again. But overall, I'm going to give it 4 stars. So I won't go into too much detail about the next 3 books because I covered them pretty well in my 24-hour reading challenge video. So if you kind of want to know more in depth, you can just watch that. The next book is The Girl Who Drank the Moon, which is about a town kept in fear by their evil rulers who have told them that there's like an evil witch in the woods and they have to basically sacrifice a child to her every year or else she'll come and destroy the town. So the complete opposite of that is actually true, and the witch finds these abandoned babies in the woods and delivers them to people on the other side of the forest and finds them loving homes. So the witch lives in the bog and she shares her home with a swamp monster and a perfectly tiny dragon. One year, the witch accidentally feeds a baby moonlight instead of starlight, which gives her extraordinary powers, and the witch decides to keep her for herself so that she can kind of control her magic and guide her through the process. As the child gets near the age of 13, her magic keeps getting stronger and stronger and chaos ensues. I really enjoyed this book. It was light, kind of low stakes, fantasy middle grade, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. This is very much a good palate cleanser. I'm gonna give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up is The Parable of the Sower, and there are kind of 2 different things going on in this novel. We have one side of things, which is kind of like the post-apocalyptic. Our main character is trying to survive and find her way up north to hopefully better living conditions. And then we also have the part of this book where the main character is trying to create kind of her own religion, which is called Earthseed. So I felt like all the religion and trying to make up a new religion really took away from the really interesting plot side of the book. I feel like this would have been totally different if the religion was left out. It kind of felt like a kid trying to be a philosopher, which is really kind of what she is, but I just thought it was kind of poorly thought out. One line that's like constantly repeated through the book is, "The only thing constant is change. Change is God. God is change." And it's like, I'm gonna need something a little bit more concrete than that. So I think if Butler would have just like stuck to the apocalyptic tale, I would have liked it a lot more. But overall, I would give this a 3 out of 5 stars. So our next book is Tuesdays with Morrie, and this is a simultaneously heartwarming and heartbreaking memoir. So the author, Mitch Albom, rediscovers his old professor in the last few months of his life. So knowing that Morrie was dying of ALS, Mitch visited him at his home every Tuesday like he used to do back in college. So their rekindled relationship kind of turns into one final class on how to live life. So I do like all the snippets of advice and wisdom in this, but I do kind of feel like they're a little bit surface level, and they didn't really dive into how to apply that advice to your own life. So this is definitely worth the read, but it's probably going to be like a one-time thing for me. So overall, I'll give it a 3 out of 5 stars. So that wraps up all the books I read in July. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.